Welcome to Arcade Beat, the show where we listen to soundtracks from video games and analyze them to figure out what makes them work, not just as a piece of music, but as a part of something larger. Ever wonder why the music to Mario 64 sounds exotic yet familiar at the same time? Or why you can't get that riff from Mega Man 2 out of your head? Arcade Beat has you covered. So the sixth song on the soundtrack. This is Twisted Streets, and this is actually the first song that you hear after the title screen. So like I said, this is the song for level 1 for the Twisted Streets, and this is the first thing that you hear when you are the kid who wakes up in this bed and steps onto this tiny platform of land just kind of floating in the sky. And the soundtrack does a really great job of starting out with that like string plucking. Makes you feel like super nervous. It's like really nerve-wracking, and it perfectly emulates like what the kid is feeling right now, what you as the player are feeling, which is like, what is going on? There's no level here. Like, this is crazy. I better watch my step.
So this song is really, really interesting for me. This is the song that I was listening to when I came up with the weird Steve Reich comparison. Because this song is unbelievably simple, but also not. Because it's very, like, the chord of it is, again, an ostinato, like a full tilt, like it's the bass line and that, like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that and the bass line are in, but so it's literally two chords. It's two chords. The whole thing, and that's the whole thing only has two chords in it. But it has that very like rooted in 3 march beat that happens initially, and then it actually transitions over to a very like more syncopated trip hop beat. And there's 2 different melodies that happen, and the second melody, the second like primary melody that comes in, actually accents things in such a way that it creates a hemiola.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to come up in a lot of these games we're doing. It creates a sense of two different rhythms happening across each other, so it's kind of like a 2/3. So the melody sounds like it's in like a 2 bass time instead of a 3 count. So like that part.
Mm-hmm.
It accents it in such a way that it sounds like it's a 2 over the 3. It's really hard to like give it to you with my voice.
It's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Same rhythm, same technical rhythm, but the accents are different.
Yeah, exactly. So it creates kind of an interesting counterpoint too, because it makes the way that the accents are done, it makes the melody kind of restart itself at a different time than the ostinato rhythm does. And then between that and the beat switching out underneath it and like the two different melodies, they get recombined in so many ways. And there's even a point where the ostinato breaks and you're just getting that flute melody, which is pretty cool. And then it like kind of brings things back together and makes it even more, because the trip hop beat I think comes back in after that, and it makes it even more kind of jarring for what would be just a pretty straight 3 march. And
in this case, I kind of want to take things from both of your points, and this is one of those tracks that's like really well done on purpose, because he has to accomplish a number of objectives here. Like Drew said, when you first wake up, there's just like his room and like the really surrounding area. There's no floor. And, as you walk around, the floor actually comes up from, the bottom of the screen, and it's kind of freaky and jarring and not normally what you're used to. So you have to be able to write that into the music. What you're going to be doing by doing things that are contrary to what the listener is expecting. Here in Western music, we have these expectations about how a track should progress. And even if we don't pick up on the fact that we understand them, just things like having that hemiola there. Hemiola is literally the counter to what is expected rhythmically. So like up to this point, we're in 3 and we're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And he just throws in a couple of bars of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you're just like, wait, that was not what I was listening to before. And then he puts in the break beat that was contrary to even the both of those. And then the other challenge that he has to do is, this is so jarring to the player. This, like, if you play like most any other game, when you start the game, there's a floor.
Yeah, so, that's a pretty standard convention.
Step 1, title screen. Step 2, build floor. Like, it's kind of, so it's visually jarring to us. So naturally, we're going to be expected to spend a lot more time just getting used to like everything. And once you see, like, I don't know about how it worked for you guys and how it works for you guys at home, but like once I saw that, like as I walked around, parts of the floor would come up, I scoured every inch of that place to get every little bit of tile that could be generated was generated in my game.
Yep.
So as such, this has to loop. It has to.
Yes.
You can't put it in silence. So how can he do that while also still being jarring? Because, again, you have to kind of keep that tension up. Well, why not, for a measure and a half, cut literally every instrument out except for a couple flute, and then have this really simplistic melody that you can just bounce the loop again. Mm-hmm. So, like, he kind of, like, killed 2 birds with 1 stone, which I really appreciated there. That last ba-na-na-na, ba-na-na, ba-da-na, that's there literally only to end the song in such a way that he can pick it right back up again.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, from a game design standpoint, like that was really, really well done, I thought.
Yeah, it's a really clever way of handling the loopability issue of, like, in-level music kind of thing. Also, I did want to touch on the quote that this track is titled from is later on, after you go to the Bastion, you need to start hunting down cores to restore the Bastion to its full functionality, to ideally, do the reset and everything. And the first time you come back here looking for the core, Rux says, ought to be a core down one of these twisted streets. So that's where the Twisted Streets name comes from. I'm just fascinated by, like, how all of these track names tie into, like, bits of dialogue and stuff from the, that was all I had on Twisted Streets, unless you guys have anything else.
Yeah, I mean,
that was pretty much it for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the middle of this soundtrack, it's mostly just going to be like, hey, remember when we said this? Like, that again,
Yeah. So next up is Terminal March. So to sort of, again, to set the scene, this song, the first time the song plays is in the third level. This is right before you actually get to the Bastion. And it's sort of your first boss battle, your first major encounter. You fight some of the larger windbags. It's not like a boss. There aren't really a whole lot of really traditional boss fights in the game, but this is your first, like, really tense fight scene. And from here on out, this is sort of the de facto fight room song of the game. And I think it works really well as that song, because not only do you have the fast driving beat of the is that the oud, that the instrument? Yeah. Yeah, that's going, like, really fast, and it gets you pumping. But you've also got, again, that, like, really sort of crushed and distorted sound that makes you feel uneasy. It puts you on edge, which is, like, exactly where you want to be in the fight scenes.
I think that's a lot of why he decided to go with very trip hop percussion situation, because it's very, I mean, it's definitely like a bit crunch hip hop beat.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, I feel like this song was very, like, the bits that make up this soundtrack minus the folksy western stuff it was very much so like Middle Eastern trip hop. It was electronic. It had a hip hop beat, but it also played a lot of harmonic minor melodies. It had the oud. It had a lot of stuff like that, and it also something that he does kind of in like a very low key way. He has a lot of like frip-isms, which for the uninitiated are ridiculously wild guitar tones that don't really used in a way a traditional like electric guitar would.
Okay.
That King Crimson.
Yeah, that Fripatronics game is strong. Like, so you have that like oud part, and you have it like octaved. So like that, you've got like the oud doubled with, I guess, the guitar, like in an octave. It provides this like really weird tonal shift to what we've listened to before. You actually have 2 drum kits in this one. I don't know if you noticed, but in the beginning, you have this one drum beat that's the ostinato, and this is really kind of actually hard to hear. It's just a kick and then 3 snare hits on the 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on top of that, the breakbeat just kind of like comes in on top of it. There's a lot going on in this one. It's almost like his idea was to just like overwhelm the listener with like, we're overwhelming him with bad guys. Why not just like, destroy him orally? So there's like, you've got the drums, you've got the oud guitar, you've got the the weird like sound effects that he's got throughout the entire thing. Everything's bit crushed. Like, there's just like, it's very sporadic. I don't know. Personally, this one's not like, on my top list of favorites for the track, just because like, as far as the game is concerned, like it doesn't, like, it definitely does say action to me, but it doesn't say like Bastion to me. I don't know.
Sure, I could see that. Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily at the top of my list either. It which is kind of ironic, because watching through a playthrough of this game recently, this song gets used a lot throughout the game.
Yeah.
So something that I'm just noticing on this pass through, and I'm hoping that it's me just noticing it now because it doesn't persist throughout the game, but so far I've noticed that like the bad guy themes are the predominantly Middle Eastern themes.
Yeah. I think that's sort of done as a more of, so Supergiant Games is like a Western studio, and they're building games with that Western mindset, and not necessarily for Western audiences, but we as a Western audience can appreciate this effect in that when you hear instruments like the sitar or the oud, you immediately are like, oh, this is like a foreign or an exotic thing. And he uses that to sort of tie, in an auditory sense, that sense of exotic and unfamiliar to things that are happening in the game. Which, works if you are specifically, like, of the same mindset as the developers and the composer specifically.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of counterpoint to that is in just that this whole game, excuse me, my speech there, this whole game is foreign, aside from the fact that you basically, what a bow is, what a gun is, what knives are, like, you can get by on the weapons, but like, aside from that, like, it's very Westworld. People are like wearing like familiar period clothes, but it's not necessarily like a Western period. Again, we're talking about like
space cowboys.
Space cowboys. You're talking about like, there are these lush landscapes. For being just tiles, like everything is just tiles. Like, there's a lot of color in this game.
Yeah.
So like you have to have that element in everything. So at some point, if this is what the kid is supposed to be used to, then you have to have something that's more different.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So like I can appreciate where he was coming from on this track. Like, this is supposed to be like, you know, super like, oh my god, like this is supposed to be jarring to the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And also like, you know, something that he's never seen before, and also has to be active, and there's like a lot going on story wise. I don't know. For me, it was just a little bit too chaotic. It was a little bit too much. He pushed the line a little bit too far. Because again, when you're already introducing this element of persistent uneasiness for the player, through the regular soundtrack. Like, again, one of the things that we learned in college, I think this was also a Jim Klein thing, where you have to have that ebb and flow where, you know, yeah, you can go ahead and push to the nth degree, but then you have to counterpoint that by bringing it down and letting the player calm down. And so just having us at the base here, you can't really like, because if you do that, you're just going to give the player a heart attack.
Right.
You know,
I mean, that goes with any sort of like creative body of work. Is you need to have peaks and valleys. Like, that's a term that you're going to hear in like film, in game design, in everything, because if you can't stay at 10 all the time, otherwise people get fatigued.
Like, yeah, you can't cast Christopher Walken in a role and then also make all of his lines start with "wow." He's already going to do that. Like, then, you can't have more of that. You know?
Yeah.
You're inevitably just going to get a double wow.
Yeah, you're just wow. And it's like, whoa, okay, a little bit too much. Let's rein it back a bit, you know?
All right. Well, the next track on the list is Percy's Escape. So I'm going to give that one a listen. All right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, thank God there's a Bastion trip in between these two things, because if I had to go from that fight to that track, like, you'd see like blood coming out of my nose and be like this is you've got Black Angels by Crumb, and then you have this track.
First off, feel free to look up Black Angels. You probably have bleeding ears afterwards.
Take a minute, and I apologize profusely, everyone.
I mean, it does its job. It's well composed, but ouch.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a point. So this one's kind of funny because it's almost like a direct like juxtaposition from the last track, in that the rhythm seems to be more of like, it's a lot of hand drums. Like, it sounds like there's a Dombek in there. And a lot of stuff like even
clay pots.
Yeah, and like the thud even kind of sounds like the kind of thud you would get out of like a cajon.
Yeah, like a tabla or something. Just doom, doom.
And then like it's got that like fiddle over it, that really agitated fiddle. So the instrumentation, even if the like feel and like the melody of it and everything isn't very like folksy, it's using a fiddle.
Yeah,
Right.
like you have these scrubbing, and they're scrubbing, and like the I feel like the mic was right up against the wood because like you can hear every single like scrub. You like I hate to harp on like the word scrub again, but like every like scratch of the horsehair against the violin strings, you can hear, and like they're jamming on that. And then you have like other people, another set of string players that are like, okay, you guys are going to do everything in minor thirds, and it's going to be off time, and it's going to be off key. Like it's almost like you like you like you like put a bend in there. Like
with notes like that, I really because I can tell you up front, and I don't know if I would have guessed this without having just like heard him say it in an interview, but those are samples, and I want to know what samples they are.
Really?
Wow.
That's incredible.
That's some quality samples.
Wow. That's not no like it's not no default like ESX.
Yeah, I'm making like a mild assumption there because I know like when he described like the soundscape of the game, there were live guitars, oud, but like he said like things like harp and strings and stuff were all sampled, and like the rhythms were all loops, stuff like that. And like MIDI stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I mean, unless he lied in an interview, that's a sample. Just like
wow,
that's impressive.
He's also really good at Logic Pro, apparently.
Yeah, right, dude. That ain't no normal like sample. That's some East West type shit. There. That's not like
that's not your father's sampling.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Like,
by the way, this track plays. The first time you hear this track is when the kid grabs the city's essence and he's trying to get back to the Bastion, but because he removed the essence, the city is collapsing around him more so than usual. And you have these platforms that are basically like the donut blocks from Mario, where after you walk on them, they're there for a couple seconds and then they're gone, they fall. So that's why this is like the most tense track in the soundtrack, because this is like one of the few timed missions in the game.
Yeah. And don't worry, there's a denouement after. Like,
yeah.
Oh.
And then you go back to the Bastion.
Yeah, like I'm just listening to the OST and I'm already like,
there's your coffee right there.
Right? Oh my gosh.
Okay, well, unless you guys have anything else, the next track is going to be a total 180. And let's listen to Faith of Jevil. So that song plays at a pretty intense part of the game. It plays during the Hanging Gardens level, which is where you find a bunch of these like frozen statue people all over the place. Like the whole place feels like a graveyard. And this is also where you meet Zolf, who is like one of the major characters of the game, and the first character aside from Rux the narrator and the kid that you meet in the game. And this song has such of a like a dissonant and resonant sound to it that it really makes you feel like you're just walking through this empty, abandoned graveyard. And, you know, I'm gonna kind of steal something that Alden likes to talk about a lot, in that, don't give me that face. This song it sounds like the area that you're in. Like there's echo and there's reverb on it, and it sounds empty, and the level also feels empty, and it just meshes really well. So
the only thing I'd add to that, you're absolutely correct, and that was actually one of the 3 points I was going to bring up.
You get 2 more.
But I got 2 more. But yeah, and the cool thing about this is, and this is something that I want to highlight, if anybody out there is listening that like, oh, I'd like to do audio for games, and then they hear me saying these things like you have to really develop the sound around the atmosphere. You can do this in one of 2 ways. In a game like Resident Evil, think like when I first started talking about this, we were talking about Resident Evil 2, and it was the song that plays when you get into the police station, and there was a ton of reverb on it. The reason that worked is because the Resident Evil police station was this big grand hall, so you wanted it to sound like it was bouncing off, you know, each other. I don't want anybody to feel like that's an absolute, you have to do it. Like, there's a lot of freedom in this. Like Drew said, there is a lot of reverb in this song, and it does give that very vague, empty feeling, that cavernous feeling. But keep in mind that you're in the open space. In an open space, you don't have that same, like, echoey reverb that you normally would. But it works here, and it works really well here, because it's not the actual, in this case, in Resident Evil's case, it was the actual game space that they were writing for. They actually wanted it to sound like a hall. Here, it's not the actual game space, but the emotional context with which that game space takes up. I want this to feel empty. I want this to feel foreboding. I want this to feel doom and gloom. So I'm gonna add that element to it so that I have that. Even though in real life, if you were to go float in the air, you wouldn't get that same type of reverb.
Yeah, no, from an emotional standpoint, like just walking around and seeing all of these essentially just dead people everywhere, it makes you feel like a shell of a person. And this is the point where Rux and the kid are wondering, like, is anybody else even alive?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more here. The sound works so well for how that's supposed to feel. It's not like, you know, they're not saying like, oh, this is a big area. They're saying like, they're essentially saying like, this should make you feel like you're empty inside. Mm-hmm. Like that. Yeah. That's what they're going for, which is really heavy of a topic for a game, but you know. Yeah,
this game gets pretty heavy.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I really have to add for this track, you guys covered the actual like context of it very well. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I really like about it, and it's not something you really get to notice very actively, it might be like it helps the effect in the back of your mind just in regards to the quality of the soundtrack overall. But listening to this track without the context of the level, without having to feel like the emotion of the game and being paying attention to like where you're at and what's going on right there, this track, in that it slows things down a bit, really helps you to hear like the complexity of the drum loops that are used and like the level of detail which goes into it. Like there's a lot of like, I don't even know, like, because a lot of it's just kind of like bit crushed sounds and stuff like that, but some of it has like a sort of like open and closed hi-hat effect on different hits, and like you could tell each time it like quote unquote opens and closes that it's like slightly different than last time, or a slightly different value to which it is like allowed to ring open or not.
And
there are extra little like hits of something foreign that get thrown in there on reloops and stuff like that, just like one-off little hits of something. Or
you hear the tone of everything.
Yeah, and it's like it's incredibly
high versus low. Yeah, like, you know, with that, like the past couple tracks, like the drum loops, essentially, if like you're not like actively paying attention to them, it just kind of sounds, you know, it just sounds like that. Like here you can actually hear like, oh, there's my kick, there's my low tom. Differentiating between those two is hard enough as it is with the bit crushing, but like adding the speed on top of that, like there is in fact low tom in this. You know, there is doom as opposed to just again having that drum loop, you know, be slower allows you to really differentiate between each drum and, you know, each different tone that we had.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I did want to make 2 points. One of them is actually relevant, and one of them is really just for fun. The relevant point is going back to the whole like you know, emptiness kind of thing. The first time that you meet Zolf, he's got his face up and it's raining. He's like
a turkey in the rain.
Yeah. He's like mentally checked out. So you have that element there again with the kind of creepiness and everything like that. And actually almost like just the tension, like when you meet a new character who winds up befriending, like you think of like any JRPG out there, you get a new, you know, character saying like, I'm going to join your party and help you out. Like you have like a fanfare, like or something like that. You have like some sort of major key music. Here it's just like, hey, I'm gonna help you out. You know,
okay, thanks, man.
Creepy, and it actually almost kind of like tells you like this guy isn't all he seems to be. So like you have that little element there, which I thought was really cool.
It sort of sets the tone for your relationship with Zelf, which is, in a word, tumultuous.
Yes, very much so. And the other just for fun thing, I don't know if you caught it, but in this track, there's this like little chorus that fades in. It's just like every once in a while, just. What? I'm going to choose to believe that this is the case, but it sounds exactly like the beginning of Secret of Mana when they're talking about the Mana Tree and then showing the whole world map and zooming in on like where you're starting. At the very beginning, it sounds exactly like that. So I'm going to choose to believe that he sampled it from that, and that's what I stick
That's
to.
Alden's headcanon.
I have no idea if that's actually true. Yeah.
Continuing on, the next track we're going to listen to is Mine Windbag Mine. So I couldn't help but notice that Sully kind of picked up on the same thing I was picking up on, which is that there's this, I don't think it's quite an ostinato because it doesn't continue the whole time, but there's this like tink sound.
It doesn't have to be the whole track. It's just kind of a general.
Yeah. So there's this like tinking sound going on in the background. And the important thing to note is that the windbag enemies are these sort of ghostly figures that attack you with a pickaxe. And they are like the sort of workforce of Zealandia, of the main city of the game. And they would work in the mines, just like, in the coal mines, just tinking away at the walls. And there's that like tink, tink sound that you can just like imagine like a bunch of windbags in a row just like banging on this cave wall with their pickaxes. I noticed Sully doing that same.
Just to clarify, so like an ostinato tends to refer to like a complete line or rhythm. It's either, like a section rather than just like a single.
Sure.
That's just kind of like getting the kick drum over and over. Mm-hmm. It's the same basic concept as the repetition, having something driving throughout, and this track's pretty much just another example of a lot of the stuff we've talked about already.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's that like clanking sound. I'm actually curious because I didn't pay attention enough to this, but the track "Spike in the Rails" coming up later, and I'm curious if that sound makes a recall.
I don't think that it actually does, but I'll take a closer listen when it comes up.
I don't think it does, at least obviously, but like I believe in myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only thing I really have to add is that this is sort of like the theme to the windbags, but it doesn't really play all that often. Like, this is going to be a bit of a complaint that I actually have with the sound design in the game is I wish that this song played more often when you are fighting the windbags. Like,
it doesn't theme, honestly. That's one of the things like that comes with the whole like songwriter approach versus he makes two things that he calls themes, and even that's pseudo dubious in respect to like the idea of theming as it applies to like characters.
Sure. And to be fair, I don't really know whose decision that is in the game making process, who decided that. Being perfectly honest here, and this is just totally conjecture, but being an indie developer, I can make a pretty educated guess that the programmers were like, all right, Terminal March, that's your big battle theme, that's your boss theme, that's just going to play when you're in a big fight. And then they just set that as the default, and like, if when they have time, go back and throw in some more interesting music in certain areas when you can, but you have a limited development time, you have limited staff, you can't necessarily pay as much attention to detail with these sort of things as you would like. Maybe it got kind of put off toward the end, and they just weren't able to put this in more spots. But it does, at the very least, this song does play during the Windbag Ranch level section, which is the War Machete bonus room, which is where there's just like tons and tons of squirts and windbags coming at you, and you have to kill them as quickly as possible with the War Machete weapon. That's just like the bonus mechanic of the game, is that every weapon has this sort of like mastery bonus level thing you can play where you have to, it's sort of like a puzzle thing. You have to prove that you're really good with this particular weapon, and then you get awarded with various materials that you can use to upgrade your weapons, etc., etc. You get like bonus stuff. But there is a level titled Windbag Ranch, which this plays. So it,
Yeah, I mean, I like this track as a track. Again, this is one of the ones that kind of misses the mark for me because, again, when you're in that bonus level, it's another one of those things that's like chaotic. Now, I know I'm taking the exact opposite. Stan says I took with Terminal March. Terminal March was a little bit too much. This one was like not enough. This one had a walking pace, to it. dun dun, but bum bum. You have that 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's very driving. It's very forward, but it's not like action. This almost reminds me of like a WWE wrestler's intro theme when he's like, scowling at the crowd. Like, this is one of the serious ones, like not even like one of the goofy ones. He's just like coming.
This is Goldberg coming out to fight.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like coming out and he's like menacing, and every footstep he takes shakes the ground. Like, that's the kind of thing that this kind of song reminds me of. So having a lot of like windbags coming out and floating, like not even making a heavy. You want those driving the boom, boom, boom. And you want that like kind of driving feeling when you have something big and hulking and heavy, not something that's literally floating above the ground.
Windbag.
A windbag. So yeah, like I can agree with with the whole mining aspect of it. I like that kind of thing. But like, if you listen to this back to back, like when you're done watching the stream or listening to the stream, listen to that track. And then go listen to, Pink Floyd's The Wall, the ba-na-na, ba, ba-na-na, ba. And if you watch that on YouTube, you'll see it with the hammers. And every time the kick drum hits, those hammers come down and they're walking and they're marching. That's the kind of feel that I'm getting here, which is completely juxtaposed to when this is actually occurring in the game.
Right. Yeah.
So not to say that this is necessarily bad. It's just
it doesn't gel.
It kind of doesn't fit
as well as the rest of the sound. Some of the rest of the soundtrack. All right. Well, I don't really. Yeah. Let's move on to Slinger's song, because this is one of my favorite tracks in the soundtrack.
So I really like this song for some specific reasons. I think it's one of the better, if not the best, at showcasing that like open tuned like gut blues guitar sound.
Yes,
that happens a lot. And this is a really good song to pick influence out of in regards to like where the influence is coming from for writing this stuff. This is the track that I think kind of showcases that it's not just like a straight like, oh, I'm going for that Firefly or Deadwood effect, because this song is Led Zeppelin. This song is When the Leaves. It's which actually fits extremely well with the concept overall, because that that When the Levee Breaks drum beat, that groove, with this mimics pretty strongly is the root of a lot of hip hop beats.
Mm-hmm.
But that with the bluesy guitar, the really like open chord bluesy guitar, he uses really like reverbed harmonica samples in this. This is Led Zeppelin's The West.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, completely converse to what we said about the last track, or at least what I was bringing up towards the end of it. This one fits so well. It's perfect. This is
just right.jpg.
The best one. Yeah. Like, so again, to just put it in perspective, this is the Slinger song, and now correct me if I'm wrong, but the Slinger is the pistol weapon that you get, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, you get the 2 pistols. So you're like you're a Western gunslinger with 2 6-shooters, like, and you're out there. The idea is fast, quick firing. You know, this song is like the gas station that nobody's been to for like weeks. There's some tumbleweed. There's a cactus. You're inside. There's light coming through the blinders. That bass is like the ceiling fan cutting the light and making a shadow against the windows. Like, this is so perfect Western. It's not even funny.
Yeah,
like it's so good.
There is this percussion sound, this sound that happens, that it sounds like stirrups hitting a wood floor. Like,
yeah,
it's just this song so perfectly screams like the Wild West.
Yeah, and just having the beat, like Sully said, having that When the Levee Breaks beat behind it, it's also super West without being so overbearing. Like, yeah, we're talking about 6 shooters. You know, you've got like the slide guitar. This is the one where he opens up. I don't know if this is his normal guitar. It doesn't sound like the Zolf and Zia guitar. It sounds like one of those old cigar box guitars.
Yeah.
Like, it really sounds like that. Like, you're getting this really heavy vibe on it, but it's not like, all right, it's too much. I get you.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, and in terms of a bit of a game context, this song plays in the Wild Outskirts level. So this is the first time that the player is introduced to the Wilds level, which, Rux says the Wilds were eventually... The Untamed Wilds is what they're called in universe, and Rux explains that the Wilds were eventually charted, but they never changed the name because of the fact that they could never really tame the Wilds. This area was just always overgrown with vegetation and wild animals, and it was just such a dangerous place to be that thematically really mimics what the Wild West was in terms of American history. Like, it was this lawless place that you would go to escape from the city life. So you've got like Selandia and the city, and then outside of that is this Wild West, this untamed wilderness. And that's where the frontier, and that's where this song plays. And it's not even just like out there, this is the first time that you encounter that. So this is literally the frontier of the wilderness, right up against the edge.
I have a favorite fun fact about this track that I found out just because I had to learn all the sounds for my own sake, funsies.
Yeah.
This track has, among other things, distorted ukulele in it.
That's something I wasn't expecting to hear.
I just thought I'd share that.
I love those little tidbits. I love like getting that peek behind the scenes of like how people got some of these sounds.
His instrumentation is pretty clever in general. Like, he's got like electric dobro in this also, and like I said, harmonica samples that are heavily reverbed and stuff. And,
yeah.
You get a little wild with it, yeah.
Nice.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching.
The next episode of our Bastion talk is going to be out on August 10th, so make sure to keep an eye out for that one. I just wanted to give a huge shout out to all of our GameWisp and Twitch subscribers, Vince, Andrew, Seraph, Alex, BB, Sully. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Your support really means a lot to us. And if you want to get in on the subscriber game, you can subscribe to us on both Twitch and GameWisp. We have exclusive emotes for use on Twitch. If you subscribe to us on GameWisp, you can get early access to our videos. You can get access to over a year and a half of stream archives. You can get some pretty snazzy exclusive dog tags with your own clan ID number on it. Some pretty cool stuff out there. Check it out. And really, if you liked the podcast, just share it with a friend. Exposure really helps us out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.